Ladies and gentlemen, I am John Pace, a member of the R.M. Santilli Foundation and the chairman of the World Lecture Series on Hadronic Mathematics, Mechanics, and Chemistry. It is a pleasure and honor for me to introduce to you Professor Ruggiero and Mrs. Carla Santilli for delivering Lecture 1E on the insufficiencies of quark and neutrino conjectures. The lecture begins with Professor Santilli illustrating his acceptance of the SU3 color theory as providing an excellent Mendeleev-type classification of strongly interacting particles into families, as well as presenting the insufficiencies, inconsistencies, and problematic aspects of the rather widespread belief that quarks are actual physical constituents of strongly interacting particles such as protons and neutrons. At the end of this first part, Professor Santilli will outline the reasons for his irreconcilable disagreement with colleagues at the Lyman Laboratory of Physics at Harvard University during the academic year 1977 through 1978. In part 2 of this lecture, Professor Santilli outlines the insufficiencies, inconsistencies, and problematic aspects of the additional conjecture that the plethora of hypothetical neutrinos are actual physical particles. In both Part 1 and 2 of this lecture, Professor Santilli stresses the sinister implications of quark and neutrino conjectures for much-needed new clean energies and fuels. In Part 3, Mrs. Santilli presents in a delicate but clear and professional language the serious implications for America and mankind caused by the widespread decay of scientific ethics in the international physics community. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere pleasure and honor to introduce Professor and Mrs. Santilli for the delivery of the final introductory lecture of this series.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last lecture of Level 1, which is dedicated to introductory lectures of this series. As such, this is the last lecture where I have an opportunity of making comments on regarding this unfortunate collapse of ethics in physics, because all the remaining lectures will be technical, mostly formula, and there is no room, or it will be appropriate in the other level 2, 3, 4, and 5 to consider ethical issues. Very well. So in this lecture, I intend to speak out my mind for a very simple reason, because now since I joined Harvard University in 1977 and announced under the support of the Department of Energy the initiation of research technically known or epistemologically known beyond Einstein and quantum mechanics, I've been the victim of coordinated, organized, all sorts of harassment, the disruptions, the discreditation, vexations, and so on. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I intend to express my judgment with respect to the colleagues who are responsible for this type of scientific banditism by using exactly the same language. I can assure you no more, but you can be sure no less. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, the first point I intend to make very clear: this interference on the pursuit of new knowledge via act of sheer banditism has got to stop and will be stopped. It will be stopped, not only by myself, now by scientists, outrageous scientists all over the world. Very well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the organization of this meeting. First, it is my duty to bring to your attention the implications of this lecture, namely that the doubts on the existence of quarks and neutrinos as physical particles, they have direct societal relevance. They imply new clean energy. This is very appropriate, especially now that Japan is suffering this enormous radiation disaster. After identifying the implication of in advance, so that you understand the rest of it, people in good faith, then I will pass to the litany of objection against the conjecture that quarks are physical particles in our space-time. In part 3, I will review the litany of objections against the conjecture that the plethora of different neutrinos are indeed physical particles in our space-time. In part 4, I have asked my wife to present her view on this global collapse of ethics. I had to insist because she did not want to be part, but finally she accepted. I think she has to express her view because she has shared with me the aggravations, the accusations, and all sorts of acts without human dignity. Being a lady, she will put a little grace in an otherwise rather, let's be straight, putrescent situation of science on a worldwide basis. Also, being a clinical social worker, she can express the problem of scientific ethics and the possible solutions, not only with grace, as I said, but also with professional insight. Finally, I've been requested by many colleagues all over the world to present my view on how restore scientific democracy in our society. And I will do this in part 5, by identifying with clarity, to avoid the farce, the origin of the problem, and submit very humbly my recommendation. I want to have them on record, of course, with no expectation that they will be seriously considered, let alone implemented. But that's the very reason why I want them on record. Very well, let's get started with part 1. Okay, let me state up front what is my position on quark conjecture. My position is identical to that of the originators of quark theory, Murray-Gell-Mann, the Nobel Prize, Murray-Gell-Mann. And this, in my words, can be essentially stated as follows. Number one, I consider, as by following Nobel Prize Gell-Mann, the so-called SU3 classification of hadron subsequently became SU3 color and then the so-called standard model. I consider this classification as being excellent. Careful word classification. We are talking about Mendeleev type classification of hadron into family. It works. It has proved through the decades to predict new hadron exactly as the Mendeleev table of atoms predicted new atoms that they were then discovered. This is evidence that it worked. I mean, somebody may think that can be improved. I have no interest. It works so well. I have no interest of any improvement whatsoever. By following again Nobel Prize Gell-Mann, I believe that the quarks as fundamental representation of SU3 are necessary for the quantitative, therefore scientific treatment of SU3 classifications. And here is, however, the fundamental point that has direct societal implications. Namely, quarks are what they technically are, not what are politically stated. Technically, with formula, with equations. Quarks are purely mathematical representation of a purely mathematical internal symmetry defined on a purely mathematical complex valued space with no connection whatsoever with our space-time. Therefore, there is no possibility that quarks can be physical particles in our space-time. Ladies and gentlemen, I made this statement various times. I have to make it again. Until I consider myself a scientist, I can assume views only when sufficiently plausible. For me to believe that quarks are physical particles in our space-time, I must be able to define them in our space-time. Ladies and gentlemen, experts in good faith know that this is impossible, because this will require quarks to be defined as an irreducible unitary representation of the Poincare symmetry, which is absolutely impossible. And in any case, there is a O'Rafferty theorem that prevents the object defined by an internal symmetry to have an image in space-time, etc., etc., etc. I should also remember that I met Professor Gell-Mann twice when I was at Harvard and MIT. He delivered seminars. I remember that at the end of each seminar, he had to suffer some attempts of being framed by local fanatics on Quark's conjecture, and he was asked bluntly, but Professor Gell-Mann, do you accept quarks? Do you believe that quarks are indeed physical particles in our space-time? I remember very vividly that Professor Gell-Mann always avoided a direct response in his very beautiful technical style. However, since he did not recognize quarks, since he did not follow the organized interest of the Boston area, he was no longer invited, and he disappeared from the picture, at least locally, but certainly not international. He remains the founders of the entire Mendeleev-type classification of hadrons into families. Okay, let's go to the root of the situation. First of all, I assume everybody knows that there has been an incredible capillary worldwide organization in academia that includes federal funding agency, major society, international meetings, Nobel Prizes, etc., in imposing the conjecture that quarks are physical particles in our space-time, namely they are the physical constituents of hadron. Why? Why this massive organization? Ladies and gentlemen, the reason is very well known, unspoken, but it is very well known. The conjecture that quarks are physical particles in our space-time is absolutely necessary to maintain the dominance of Einstein's special relativity and relativistic quantum mechanics also for the interior of hadrons. In the event quarks are proven not to exist in our space-time, automatically quantum mechanics is no longer applicable in the interior of hadrons, and automatically Einstein's special relativity is gone. This background point has to be kept in mind to really understand the very essence of this lecture. Now, let's see what are the consequences of this conjecture that quarks are physical particles in our space-time. Ladies and gentlemen, the consequences are, I can only qualify them as sinister for mankind. Because if quarks are indeed physical particles, then a number of possible new clean energy becomes absolutely beyond, cannot even be conceived or treated, then they are eliminated ab initio. However, and here is the point where we start to approach very serious ethical problem in science that if we have any dignity we have to address. If quarks indeed are just purely mathematical objects and are not the physical constituents of hadrons, ladies and gentlemen, there are fundamental new clean energy for mankind that have been suppressed for 30 years, systematically assassinated, disrupted, discredited, to serve evil organized interest against mankind. It is just that simple. You can see this in many ways. The neutron is the biggest reservoir of energy available to mankind. Why? Because it decays spontaneously when isolated into by emitting a highly energetic electron. Electrons are not considered as harmful radiation because can be stopped with a thin metal shield. And they have about close to 1 million electrovolt in kinetic energy, plus they are charged. As we will see later, they can produce a double energy, at least in principle. Now, here is the point. If the neutron is composed by 3 quarks, as organized interest and Einstein wanted to impose on all of us, then there is no possibility whatsoever of stimulating the decay of the neutron. because the secret of utilizing this energy is clean, inextinguishable energy in the interior of the neutron, crucial depend on the capability to stimulate the decay when we want, and in a number of neutrons we want. Now, on the contrary, if according to Rutherford, the neutron is a compressed hydrogen atom, namely the constituents of the neutrons are a proton and electron, of course obeying a covariant theory. It's impossible for quantum mechanics, as said in preceding lecture. Then there are many ways of triggering that can be easily conceived, quantitatively treated, and studied in laboratory, triggering the synthesis of the stimulated decay of the neutron. But this is only one of many that are called hadronic energy, namely energy originating via mechanism in the structure of individual hadron, such as the proton and the neutron. The energy available now, they are nuclear, namely they are only possible on a collection of hadrons. No, we are talking about mechanisms at a new level, way deeper than what is way beyond the 20th century. But there's only one. I want to mention only this one. The synthesis of the nitrogen has been done, and it has been proven that it cannot produce harmful radiation, and it cannot release radioactive waste. Either it exists, and what I stated is correct, or it does not exist, and in that case too, if the synthesis is not possible, then there are no radiation. You just look at the synthesis of carbon and deuterium into the nitrogen. Either you do synthesize this, where are the radiation coming from? From nowhere. There is no harmful radiation is possible. Where are the harmful residual radioactive waste? Where are nowhere, because the nitrogen is a stable, light, natural, stable element. So either this thing occurs or it doesn't occur. Now, let's look at the possibility, how this is triggered. This is triggered by an electric arc and other means. The energy is about 1 billion times smaller than the energy needed to crush those nuclei so as to produce harmful radiation that would to please organized interest in Einstein, because they don't want this type of energy. So there is no other possibility. In any case, it has been published in referee journal, has been independently verified by nuclear physicists, is treated in international conference and meeting. But here is the point, ladies and gentlemen. Organized interest in Einstein and their associate have already authorized over $1 billion spent in the search of the hot fusion. $1 billion at hundreds of millions of dollars per year, in full knowledge that it is impossible. In full knowledge that it is impossible, because it is known by technicians that instability at those extremely high energy are so big that it is extremely difficult to control. Assuming that they be controlled, it will have no practical value for the foreseeable future. So why billions of dollars for an energy that is dirty, is clean? It is not clean. We know it's fair, and this energy is opposed. The studies are opposed, are disqualified. If there were people who were in good faith, they said, let's invest some money in this and prove that it does not exist. That is the correct, because experimental results can only be disproved by counter experiments. Any theoretical dismissal. Dr. Santilli is not a nuclear physicist, he's a mathematician, he does not understand fusion. Dr. Santilli is a charlatan. Dr. Santilli does not understand particle physics. The Jewish physicist Leon Lederman, as he wrote to Senator Billy Bragg, etc., etc., etc. Why they do this? Because they don't have technical argument against. And they are not in good faith. Because if they were in good faith, they will rush to repeat the experiment and disprove the existence via counter experiments. Ladies and gentlemen, the damage to society that's now is caused daily by this organized cartel on Einstein and quantum and relativistic quantum mechanics. The damage is too big to be tolerated. Unless I denounce it, I cannot go home tonight and look at my grandchildren with peace in my soul, because I will become an accomplice. Silence is complicity when faced act of scientific banditism against society. That's what it is. This is what it is. Those are the consequences. That's why I cannot go home and look at my grandchildren. Japan has been hit by this catastrophe in radiation. Look at the cloud. This radioactive cloud has already reached the American West Coast. What is the pertinent question here that it is my duty to bring to your attention? Question: if the will of the Department of Energy, the will of our government, had been at least not opposed by organized interest at Harvard University, by the Jewish physicist Steven Weinberg, Shelley Glashow, and Sidney Coleman, when the Department of Energy wanted me to initiate a new line of research that will eventually, surpassing Einstein and quantum mechanics, that will eventually lead, at that time there were expectations to new clean energy. Suppose that at least they have not objected, obstructed, disrupted this research, let alone collaborate. Just let us, suppose they would have just let us do our job alone. Question: will the energy that now we have to produce underground will have already reached industrial level 34 years later, and therefore this tragedy could have been avoided? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. So that's why I use the word scientific crimes. That's why the word scientific crime is used now all over the world. We have reached a level that cannot be tolerated anymore. And so let's look at this cloud. This is the responsibility of academia. That there is no possibility of coming up with basically new energy unless we surpass Einstein, we surpass quantum mechanics, we go deeper into the structure of hadrons. Unless we do that, there is no hope. That's why my statement, the preceding lecture, that America is doomed unless we identify the origin of this collapse of scientific democracy in America and get rid of it. There is America will have no hope, will decay and without revival. This is the responsibility of academia, opposing the surpassing of Einstein. A child being checked for radiation. All academicians who are members of the cartel on Einstein, and there's a capillary worldwide organization, remember my words in preceding lecture, by personal experience, down to the janitors of the Department of Physics, the janitor of federal funding agency, let alone US Senate and the news media, etc., is a capillary organization beyond the imagination. Only people who have been the victim of attack by this organization can understand, and their family can understand what we are talking about. Look at this, another explosion. Now already radiation has reached the water level. Today, March 21st, 2011, has reached the water level in Japan. And here is another child checked for radiation, ladies and gentlemen. My heart bleeds to see the beautiful Japanese people to have been exposed to, to this horror. Look at this. I will repeat this picture with, when we are talking about the Nobel Committee in Stockholm. What is the responsibility of the Nobel Committee for this type of view? There is a very precise responsibility. Unless we identify, ladies and gentlemen, we will make never any correction. Society will keep decaying and decaying without dignity and without the possibility of a rebirth. Is this what the cartel on Einstein wants for all of America? To clean to have their car under the dust of radioactive poison? Or is this the future of the United States of America if we are unable to get rid of organized crime or scientific crime on Einstein and reestablish a scientific democracy in the United States of America? In closing, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my deepest sympathy and sorrow to Japan. It is my opinion that Japan is a victim is a victim of the corruption in academia in the Western world. Japan did not have the resources of, it is the duty, in any case, it's the duty of the global academic community to come up with new clean energy, and not the responsibility of Japan. So it is my opinion, this picture in Japan is a visual expression of the sufferance that one country, beautiful country, magnificent, with a magnificent history, is suffering because of corruption in academia. Ladies and gentlemen, on my honor, this horror could have been avoided if there were a serious scientific democracy in the United States of America during the last part of the 20th century. Okay, here you see a protest following this radiation disaster in Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to express my disappointment at this picture. Why disappointment? Because they are complaining to what? The tower, the Eiffel Tower? Perhaps the Eiffel Tower is responsible for this disaster? Ladies and gentlemen, if people in Paris are in good faith, they should go and protest in front of the main entrance, l'Université de Paris, because the Paris University is the very hub of the organized scientific crime in France, with a long history of manipulation to maintain, is part of the worldwide cartel, maintaining the dominance of Einstein theory under condition they were not conceived or verified for, therefore intentionally non-scientific and intentionally scheming. That's where the demonstrations have to be presented, not at the tower. So where the responsibility lies, not underneath the Eiffel Tower. In regards to the United States, I hope there will be a demonstration. There have been none. Nor I expect, because of unfortunate apathy that is assassinating America. And we don't complain anymore as we used to. And therefore we are losing our country. But if there are protests that they have to be done in front of the university that are responsible for the suppression of scientific democracy, and therefore for the suppression of alternative new form of energy. Here, Princeton University, Institute for Advanced Studies, also in Princeton, they are known to be the very, very apex of the organized scientific crime on Einstein. Let me make you an example. In the 2002, I believe, I can check the records, World Congress on Mathematics, the director of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, who was unfortunately for America, and unfortunately also for human society, had a key role in the admission committee of this World Congress on Mathematicians. This guy, I cannot call a doctor because this guy prohibited Professor Gregorio Tsagas, chairman, I repeat, chairman of the Department of Mathematics of the University of Aristotle in Thessaloniki. He prohibited Professor Tsagas to deliver a speech on Santilli Lie admissible covering of Lie theory. He was prohibited from presenting, this fully documented. Then the director of the Institute for Advanced Study was supposed to be sued in that connection. Then we said, we just had it because this collapse of ethics was so disruptive that even disrupted the filing of lawsuit. Why did so? Because the word, as indicated in preceding lecture, Lie theory is synonymous for technician of Einstein. Always the same origin, always the same origin. Organized the interest of Einstein. The moment you surpass Lie theory with the Lie admissible theory, Einstein is gone for broader condition, of course, beyond those conceived by Einstein. Similarly, I have to protest at Harvard University. That's the science center. That's where I worked for 3 years. That's where there was the suppression, organized suppression by the local physicists, not mathematicians. Mathematicians behave, I have nothing but express my appreciation to my former colleague there at the Department of Mathematics, Shlomo Sternberg, as well as other Professor Birkhoff. He gave me his office to organize the first workshop. All mathematicians were very nice and very decent and first of all, they were decent human beings, and then they were outstanding mathematicians. Well, the problems are with the physics department. And that's where they manage with continuous attacks until he has no value whatsoever. He does not know what he's talking about, etc., etc. That's where the protest should be, in the yard of Harvard University, or at the MIT, where there's been other additional horrendous cases of scientific banditism to suppress undesired new knowledge. And then you go to the University of Austin in Texas. Everybody knows that the grandfather, I'm sorry, I have to use the word, or if you want the czar or the boss, this organized cartel worldwide on Einstein theory is at University of Texas in Austin. His name is the Jewish physicist Steven Weinberg, universally recognized for this. I think he should have the dignity of admitting that indeed is the representative of, it is in any case, the worldwide community sees him in that way. That's where because in this building, in this environment, he has operated for 30 years, since 1981, for disrupting all and assassinating. Remember the director, Renato Angelo Ricci, president of the Italian Physical Society, in writing admitted Dr. Santilli, your paper cannot be accepted because they are rejected by your former colleague at Harvard, the Professor Nobel Prize Steven Weinberg. This is all documented in or Cornell University. My God, that's where perhaps some of the biggest protests should occur. For the record, Cornell University houses the biggest depository of scientific paper in the world. It's called ArcSiv, for people who do not know. What is this? It's a depository. Namely, people send electronically their copy, and that copy is supposed to be classified. Supposed to be. Ladies and gentlemen, as everything in science, that too has been the subject of horrendous manipulation. I have to use the word shameful. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost dignity unless we use the word shameful, because that's what it is. What is shameful for Cornell University, as well as for the National Science Foundation that funds this project of the ArcSiv, what is shameful is that this worldwide project has anonymous editors. Namely, the editors operating this manipulation of hundreds of thousands of papers, millions of papers by now, are anonymous. Why they're anonymous? Because, of course, they don't have the courage to present their names, because they operate in darkness to manipulate things. In any case, we reach one point of the generation of even the most elementary rules of scientific, of human decency, let alone scientific decency. I did file a lawsuit against Cornell University because of the archive. The lawsuit was at the federal court in the 5th district in Tampa, Florida. The presiding judge was Mary Day, Stephen Mary Day. Mary Day, I assume experts will understand what the significance behind the name. Okay, so why so? Well, because in the high energy archives, they had allowed the publication of a long series of 12 or 13 papers copying identically the words and the equations of my most important achievement of my life, which is the isotopy, one of the most important, which is the isotopy of the Lorentz and Poincare symmetry, presented in lecture 3A. There were papers and papers in which everything is copied without any quotation whatsoever of my work. So they reach a point. Now I tried at least to upload in the same archive at least some of my papers to counteract for scientists in good faith this type of clear attempt of paternity fraud, but I was prohibited. So the other guys were allowed to upload, copying my theory with a clear scheme, and I was not. So there was a lawsuit. Unfortunately, the judge Mary Day acted in favor of Cornell University in such a blatant way that he reached the extreme that people should know, including foreign scientists should know. He reached the extreme of dismissing my motion my motion for a judgment because of lack of representation by the originator of this scam. There were two physicists from Italy, Nardone, Fabio Nardone and Roberto Mignani were the originator of this scientific misconduct, and they were the primary defendant in the lawsuit. They never elected any representation. So one day I filed a motion that I wanted judgment for lack of representation. Judge Meriday dismissed that motion. What are the implications? Because the acceptance of that motion would have been very damaging to Cornell University, would have implied all sort of aggravation for Cornell University. This is my perception. I pray to be wrong. What are the implications for America? Very serious, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because this is that judgment essentially authorizes all foreign scientists to copy ad litteram everything they want produced by American scientists, and if they are sued because of this paternity fraud, they don't have to even elect a representation. Namely, when they receive the serving of the lawsuit abroad, they can just trash it out, because Judge Meriday has set up the precedent, this horrendous precedent, that indeed there is no need of a representation in the case of a clear case of copyright infringement, paternity frauds, and other. This to give you an idea of how the situation in science is. Now, incidentally, I should also indicate that I tried attorneys all over America, the attorney that will represent me, but to be accredited with the federal court, attorney have to state under pain and penalty of perjury that they understand the complaint. Ladies and gentlemen, there was no attorney that could understand the complaint. The complaint was mostly a formula, so it required a post-PhD knowledge in mathematics and physics. I could find no attorney that had that type of knowledge. So I had to fight this lawsuit alone. I reached a point in which the lawsuit had to be appealed and had to be passed to criminal proceedings because of false statement of some of the participants. And I said, that's it. I said, let me go back and do my research. If the society is decaying because of this type of episode, there's nothing I can do. And similarly, this University of California, Berkeley, this is the Yale University. Those are the universities where complaints should be, pickets should be organized to wake them up and be leaders in scientific democracy, not leaders in organized suppression of scientific democracy, which has been going on systematically in those universities, per my personal documented experience of decades and decades with total impunity. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, my heart is bleeding, because I fear that unless we correct this, America is doomed, cannot survive this type of scenario.